Shada Monfort here. Hi, welcome back to part 2 of our series on Apollonius. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll link this up here for you. In this video, what we're going to do is show the extent of Apollonius's influence contemporary with his own life and down through history. We can see that in his own life, not only did he influence pagan culture in Greece and Turkey, he influenced the Roman emperors and the Roman Empire, and influences from the Gnostics. We can see influences from the alchemists, the later Cathars. We can find traces of him not only in the modern Christian belief systems, who 300 years later based their gospels upon the stories of Apollonius's life, but we also see traces of it in Islamic culture and Hindu culture as well. And of course, he has an enduring effect on modern philosophy with people as diverse from the Age of Enlightenment as Bruno and Rabelais. Apollonius changed the way that we think about philosophy and our place in the universe. Our next video will deal with magic that is attributed to Apollonius. Apollonius was known as the master of talismans, so we'll do a talismanic working from an Apollonian spell for you in our next video. Also, please make sure that you have a look at our previous videos about this hermetic lineage. It starts with Pythagoras, then comes to Apollonius, and finally to Hypatia. These three people definitely shaped the modern world.
The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE and the Edicts of Emperor Theodosius I in 381 to 389 CE made the dissemination of information on Apollonius punishable by death. Bibliographical references after the year 400 were unfavorable to Apollonius, by authors who attempted to demonize and debunk this fiction in defense of the Jesus Christ. Therefore, many of the source documents were destroyed, and the Philostratus biography went underground, and officially disappeared from history until the republication of Philostratus, Life of Apollonius of Tyana, in Venice in 1501 to 1504. The 1932 French book by Maurice Meagher linked the saga of Apollonius to the Albigensians. They were a Gnostic Cathar cult that flourished in Albi, France, in the 12th to 13th centuries, until they were obliterated in then First Medieval Crusade, the so-called Albigensian Crusade, initiated in 1208 CE by Pope Innocent III, and completed by his papal successors in 1244. Curiously, Christian Rosencreutz, pseudonym of Johann v. Andrea, founder of the Rosicrucian order around 1614, is said by legend to have been buried on a mountain near Albi. An Arab chemist and philosopher Jabir ibn Hayyan around 800 CE wrote about Balines the Wise, i.e., Apollonius of Tyana, and a Spanish writer Hugues de Santoya, styling himself Geber after Jabir. Around 1200, cited both Aristotle's Secretum Secretorum, Secret of Secrets, and Jabir's work. Apparently, it is from the writings of Jabir and Geber that we have modern knowledge of the emerald tablets that were attributed first to Aristotle in his Secretum Secretorum, which Hugues de Santoya translated from Arabic into Latin. Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander the Great, who may have brought the tablets from Egypt or Babylonia to Greece, perhaps on the actual advice of Aristotle. Then later still, many directly attributed the tablets to Apollonius of Tyana, said to have retrieved them from the cave of Trophonius about 100 kilometers northwest of Athens. Subsequently, the tablets were acquired by the personal library of Roman Emperor Hadrian in about 120 CE, 20 years after the death of Apollonius. Where these tablets are located today is anyone's guess, but again, curiously, they are rumored to have been hidden away a final time in Christian Rosencreuz's mountain tomb at Albi, not far from Avignon, where the Holy See was headquartered during the 1300s. Comparisons between Apollonius and Jesus became commonplace in the 17th and 18th centuries, in the context of the modernist polemic about Christianity, in the Age of Enlightenment. Several advocates of Enlightenment, deism and anti-church positions, saw him as an early forerunner of their own ethical and religious ideas, a proponent of a universal, non-denominational religion, compatible with reason. These comparisons continue into the 21st century. Apollonius' most powerful patron. The earliest and by far the most detailed source about the life of Apollonius of Tyana is the lengthy, novelistic gospel biography written by the sophist Philostratus at the request of Empress Julia Domna. She died in 217 AD, and he completed it after her death, probably in the 220s or 230s AD. Why would an empress commission a pagan gospel? Julia Domna, 160 to 217 AD, was the wife of Emperor Septimius Severus. Unlike most imperial wives, Domna accompanied her husband on his military campaigns and stayed in camp with the army. She was respected for her political, as well as military statecraft against Rome, and viewed positively for most of her tenure. Coins minted with her portrait refer to her as Julia Augusta. Following the death of Severus in 211, Domna became the first empress dowager to receive the title combination Pia Felix Augusta, usual for a Roman empress mother. Julia Domna was born in Emesa, present-day Homs, in Roman Syria, to an enormously wealthy Arab family of priests, making her from the same heritage as Apollonius. She opposed the attempt of Rome to become the political and religious capital of the world. She had Rome's most sacred objects moved to her Elagable family temple and blended the sun god Elagable, the god Baal, or the Lord God, with the Roman Sol Invictus, Apollo, and raised him up above Jupiter, as the great good and moral god of the universe. Her name, Domna, is an archaic Arabic word meaning black or black sun. This referenced her family heritage, the priest kings of Elagable, which took the form of a black stone now in Mecca, of the famous temple of Elagabalus. Philostratus' account of Apollonius' life. The collecting of the writings of Apollonius and the documentation of his gospel was a major work of political propaganda, supporting her divine right to rule, the sacredness of her beliefs, and the historical holiness of her people from Pythagoras through to Apollonius, a lineage reaching back almost 1,000 years. So, she commissioned Philostratus to compile a complete lineal account of his life. Apollonius was so respected that Julia Domna's husband Emperor Septimius Severus had a statue of the Greek sage in his shrine together with those of Christ and Orpheus. No one has the right to dismiss this testimony of Philostratus, who used numerous source data at Byzantium, any more than that of Herodotus, Virgil, Plutarch, or any other writers of antiquity. Philostratus published his biography in 220 CE. This account shaped the image of Apollonius for posterity. It is a valuable source because it contains data from older writings that were available to Philostratus, but disappeared later on. Among these works are an excerpt, preserved by Eusebius, from On Sacrifices, in the Letters of Apollonius. At least two biographical sources that Philostratus used are lost: a book by the imperial secretary Maximus describing Apollonius's activities in Maximus's home city of Aegae in Aeolus, and a biography by Moiragenes. There also survives a collection of letters of Apollonius. One of the essential sources Philostratus claimed to have access to was the memoirs or diary of Damis, an acolyte and companion of Apollonius. Philostratus describes Apollonius as a person of striking physical appearance, who was also a truly good and wise man. He was a wandering seeker of knowledge, as well as a teacher of philosophy and miracle worker. He was mainly active in Greece and Asia Minor, but also traveled to Italy, Spain, North Africa, Mesopotamia, Kashmir, Tibet, North India, Egypt and Ethiopia. He was always willing to help those in need and stood up to tyrants. He was favored by the gods. He sought nothing for his services, but always had more than he needed through the generosity of others, patronage of kings, and extreme good luck. Journey to India. Of personal interest to me is his journey to a place that we may call today Shambhallah. It is so central to the philosophy of Apollonius that Philostratus devoted 2.5 of the 8 books of his life of Apollonius to the description of a journey of his hero to India. Apollonius followed in Pythagoras's footsteps, who had travelled to India some 500 years before, sparing no pains in his efforts to discover the sources of Oriental piety and wisdom. Apollonius was presented with a map enshrined in bronze addressed to him by Pythagoras long in the past. En route to the Far East, Apollonius reached Hierapolis Bambus, Manbij, in Syria, where he met Domna, who became his lifelong companion, accompanying him and documenting this journey. On this journey Apollonius meets Philostratus, the Indo-Parthian king of Taxila, a city located in northern ancient India in what is now northern Pakistan, around 46 CE. And the description that Philostratus provides of Taxila comports with modern archaeological excavations at the ancient site. In 2 Sanskrit texts quoted by Sanskritist Vidushakara Bhattacharya, we find evidence showing that Apollonius was known in India. It describes Apollonius, in one of them together with Dharma, Western yogis, who later learnt Advaita philosophy. Some are so astounded by these passages in the Sanskrit texts that they believe they must be interpolations by a late 19th century forger. However, considering the extent of references to Apollonius in the ancient world, it would be rather surprising if there were no references to Apollonius in Hindu written records. Added to this, we have historical records by the critically respected historian Philostratus that the immortal master Apollonius travelled to Shambhallah for his final teaching. Below is a condensed English translation of part of Philostratus's account of Apollonius' arrival and discussions with the sages of the hidden kingdom of all the gods, located in the northern mountainous region of the Indus, Tibet, sent to me by a friend, John F. Winston. Apollonius met the men who knew everything. One day a priest of Dephian Apollo brought him a copper map and told Apollonius that the chart showed the road to the city of the gods. Soon Apollonius of Tyana was travelling east. In Mesphala, Nineveh, a man by the name of Domna offered his services as a guide. After a difficult trek from Babylon to India, the 2 travellers turned north from the Ganges in the direction of the Himalayan range. It can be assumed that their destination was Tibet, because the journey took 18 days. As the Greek sage was approaching the Asiatic Olympus with his devoted companion and servants, strange things began to take place. The path by which they had come disappeared after them. The countryside shifted its position, and they seemed to be in a place preserved by illusion. On the boundary of this wonderland, they were met by a boy who addressed them in Greek and by name, as if Apollonius had been expected. Apollonius of Tyana was then presented to the ruler of this land, whom Philostratus calls Iarchas. The fabulous country was full of scientific marvels. There were wells from which pillars of light projected upward like searchlights. Radiant stone illuminated the town and turned night into day. 4 tripods automatons walked into the dining room to serve food and drinks, as the travellers sat down at the host's table. Apollonius' biographer borrows from Homer the description of these robots, which, instinct with spirit, rolled from place to place around the blessed abodes, self-moved, obedient to the beck of gods. The technological achievements and intellectual superiority of this community impressed Apollonius so much that he only nodded when King Iarchas stated an obvious fact: "You have come to men who know everything." Their 2 most important teachings for Apollonius. 1. You must know yourself before you can know anything or everything else. 2. The highest goal to achieve is to be a truly good person. Though they do discuss so many more things than that. There were apparent supernatural phenomena as well. Apollonius and Domna saw demonstrations of levitation, as men became weightless and floated in the air. According to the philosopher from Tyana, these learned men were living on earth and at the same time not on it. Does this phrase have an allegorical meaning or literal? If literal, then these people might have had communication with other worlds or dimensions, particularly since they had mastered gravity. Then we can understand the words of Iarchas that the universe is a living thing. Apollonius received a mission from the adepts of Asia. 1. He was to bury certain talismans or magnets in places of future historical meaning. 2. Secondly, he was to shake the tyranny of Rome. The stay of Apollonius in Asia, where he studied at the feet of those who knew everything, is of great historical interest. Apparently, robotic technology is not new, if automatons served Apollonius and Damas in the palace of Iarchas. Was anti-gravitation or levitation used by those who could raise themselves and glide in the air? According to the story, the landscape shifted when Apollonius and Damas had arrived at the border of this secret abode in Tibet. Bending light waves is more of a topic for science fiction than for science, but this could explain the wavering scenes of the Tibetan border and the Greek philosopher's disappearance at the tribunal of Domitian. Brilliant light from wells or stones could have been produced by electricity or some other energy. Apollonius' magical abilities. Philostratus recounts many episodes of Apollonius seeing the future and his astounding psychic abilities, and on one incident, of remote viewing ability. When Emperor Domitian was murdered on the 18th of September 1996 AD, Apollonius was said to have witnessed the event with his inner vision whilst still in Ephesus, at about midday, on the day it happened in far-off Rome, and told those present, "Take heart, gentlemen, for the tyrant has been slain this day." In fact, both Philostratus and the historian Cassius Dio wrote about this incident. In particular, he tells lengthy stories of Apollonius entering the city of Rome, opposing its corruption and his disregard of Emperor Nero's ban on philosophers. His portrayal as the hero magician who stood unafraid against the tyrants continued with his being summoned, as a defendant, to the court of Domitian, where he defied the emperor in blunt terms. He had been accused of conspiring against the emperor, performing human sacrifice, and predicting a plague by means of magic. He replied that this corrupt court had no power over him.
"I'm sorry, but you see it is my curse to tell the absolute truth."
And dematerialized from the courtroom. There were many mystical things that happened when Apollonius was in the presences of the Roman emperors. Apollonius arrived in Rome at the unfavorable period of the persecution of philosophers, Christians, and others by Nero, and was shortly summoned to a tribunal. As the prosecutor unrolled the scroll with the charges against Apollonius, it was uncannily turned into a blank. Without the charges against him, there was no indictment, and Apollonius of Tyana was set free. From that day on, the Roman authorities began to have a superstitious fear of the wise man of Tyana. Under Vespasian he fared much better, and was appointed counselor to the Roman emperor, and Emperor Titus said to him, "I have indeed taken Jerusalem, but you Apollonius have captured me," some 35 years after the death of Christ AD 70. Apollonius was now aged 76 approx. During the reign of Domitian, he was accused of un-Roman activities. At the trial, Apollonius looked with disdain at the emperor, who he had known as a boy. The patricians felt anxiety, remembering the weird things that had gone on at the tribunal of Nero. Domitian and the judges made an attempt to whitewash themselves by withdrawing some of the charges on condition that Apollonius of Tyana would be convicted in the end. Facing the emperor of Rome, Apollonius drew his cloak around him, saying, "You can detain my body, but not my soul, and, I will add, not even my body." And then he vanished in a flash of light seen by hundreds in the court hall. The centenarian Apollonius is traced to Ephesus, and then chroniclers lose sight of this amazing personality. Philostratus writes that upon his death, Apollonius of Tyana underwent heavenly assumption. This too was later assumed by Christian writers in their addendums to the Gospels of Jesus' political exploits in Judea. There are several writings and many letters that have been ascribed to Apollonius. Some of them are lost, others have only been preserved in parts or fragments. Flavius Philostratus claimed, "It would be endless to enumerate all the works that have been written in whole or in part regarding this life of Apollonius. Everything is worn and withered away by time, whereas time itself never ages, but remains immortal because of memory." Apollonius of Tyana.
so much for watching this video. We appreciate your time. Remember, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, and share this information. We really appreciate the time that you spend watching our videos. Every second counts, as well as every like, every share. So if you appreciate this information and the work that Magick Magazine is trying to do in spreading practical information about working magic for free on the internet, then maybe you'd even like to support us a little further by going over to our Patreon page and signing up there. For as little as $1, you can start to support the work that we do. And we hope to see you again for our part 3, the magic of Apollonius, coming to you very soon.